We're going to make this podcast totally listener-driven because some of the ideas y'all have had for me have been outstanding. And the most popular of which is what we're going to do today, which is what should you do before you send an LOI, a letter of intent. Now, I know this episode is going to be geared more towards first-time buyers, but I'm telling you, even for people who already own some parks and you're a bit seasoned in the industry, there's going to be some detail here that will be worth your time.
Warning. This podcast features the truth about owning and operating mobile home parks. The following program is not designed to be sexy. It will not hype you up on MHPs. Rather, this is a raw take on this industry and how you find your own path to success. Welcome to MHP IRL, Mobile Home Parks in Real Life, with your host, Ryan Norris.
If you've ever closed on a single-family home, you know it's stressful. Closing on a mobile home park is similar, but amplified. The time frame is longer, the details are more complicated, the costs are elevated, and the opportunity for things to go wrong sometimes will make your head spin. It's scary. It's stressful. At times, you'll question yourself. You may even back out of the deal. This happens. But fear is overcome by courage. And courage has its roots in confidence. And confidence has roots in being prepared. And that's what we're going to do today. Let's begin with a quote. If you know the enemy and know yourself, you need not fear the results of 100 battles. Sun Tzu, The Art of War. If you've listened to my other episodes, you can probably guess where I'm going with that quote. Endgame. Rather than sounding like a broken record, I'll say it up front. Endgame is crucial and will apply to each point we will talk about on this episode. Part 1, debt. You'll rarely face a situation where you're going to want to take a property down all cash. If you don't have a background in finance, take the time, do the math, understand the power of financial leverage. What you'll find is, for our purposes, it's almost never going to make sense from a return perspective to purchase a mobile home park all cash. Now, let me clarify. When I say take a property down cash, I mean purchasing cash without the goal of eventually putting debt on the asset. But even from a macro perspective, all things being equal, it's better to diversify your capital rather than to just dump everything into one place. If seller carry isn't an option, you'll have to call on the banks. Bigger properties are generally speaking going to be easier to finance. Loan brokers, probably your best bet here, especially if you don't already have a network to call on, because they already have the contacts. And they'll do a lot of heavy lifting for you. Bigger properties also are easier to obtain non-recourse loans on, and also better debt terms. Smaller properties, they're a bit more challenging. Most loan brokers aren't going to touch anything under $2 million. You'll have to call those local banks yourself. Most are going to say no, and the ones that do say yes will likely come with recourse. For our first deal ever, we called over 40 banks and every single one said no. However, by our second deal, we knew the routine, and 2 of the smaller banks said yes. We ended up going with one of those 2, and since then, that bank has helped us close much hairier deals quicker. So in other words, we are now in a position where we can close on smaller, hairier mobile home park deals quick. That's a seriously valuable competitive advantage. Our most latest acquisition, the only reason why it happened was because of that relationship. You're going to want to be in that position. You can only do this by banging the phones, making those connections, and establishing those relationships yourself. With regards to seller carry, I have literally never accepted seller carry terms. I want to preface this by saying I have only been offered seller carry a limited number of times, so I don't think it would be fair to claim what I'm about to say can be applied across the board. But in my experience, seller carry options are just as delusional as the high prices that these sellers often want. In other words, their terms have been insane. For example, I've been offered 45% LTV and less. I've been offered interest rates close to 10%. I've been offered variable rates that strongly favor the seller, and so on and so forth. To be fair, I have heard seller carry can be extremely attractive, and I'm sure it is. I would just strongly recommend you have a lawyer make the contract airtight, because when things go bad, boy, do they ever go bad. So it's best to just make sure everything is good up front. To summarize the debt piece of this equation, it pays to be well connected. Part 2, equity. Even if you have the money to take down deals on your own, you might want to consider what I have to say in this section. Think about that for a minute. Why would you ever not want to take a property down so low if you could? The answer? Strategy, risk, and returns. First, if your strategy is to grow big, you will want less of your own money tied up in a limited number of illiquid investments. From a risk perspective, the less properties, the more concentrated your risk, hence the more devastating a calamity can be. Also, your returns may suffer, even if you hit a home run. Yes, I know that sounds like a paradox, so let me explain. For example, let's say you bring in friends and family money as investors and they want to be 100% passive. You deserve compensation for your additional workload in that situation. Now, that can come in the form of an asset management fee, a finder's fee, promote structure, waterfall structure, so on and so forth. Your compensation structure may actually prove more lucrative for yourself if you bring on passive investors. But if you're like me when I started, you will have to bring in equity capital. You need to pick the right capital partner. Not all investor capital is created equal. It's like a marriage. You'll need to vet the individual or group very strictly. Do you want more control or do you mind having less? Does monthly reporting bother you? Do you value quick decision making? Is this investor willing to take on recourse debt? What will happen when things go south? There's a Harvard business case study about an entrepreneur who started his own company, ran it successfully for 10 years, put every penny he had into the company, and then it was muscled out from him and he walked away penniless, even though the company was fabulously profitable and successful. There's a ton to consider when selecting an investor, and know that there are plenty of horror stories, even when things are going well. Choose wisely. Are you abiding by the law? If you've ever taken the Series 7, you know the SEC drills you on fundraising regulations. If you're looking for passive investment and are actively marketing to high net worth individuals, you may be breaking the law. It may be worth your time to consult with an attorney that specializes in SEC litigation. This is my opinion, but I err on the side of safety. Right now, I know a high net worth individual that is suing a super successful mobile home park operator. Let me tell you, if this operator doesn't have every T crossed and I dotted on his contract, this rich guy's lawyer is going to crush them. Always consider your downside risk. What about some ways you can structure a deal? The GP versus the LP. A GP, or general partner, aggregates and manages the investment opportunity while sourcing the capital from the limited partners, the LPs, who do not partake in the management of the investment and thus also have limited liability. If you have recourse debt and you don't have a high enough net worth to satisfy the collateral requirements, you may not be able to solo GP the opportunity since the LP faces limited liability. In layman's terms, the bank needs someone to go after if things go badly. And if that's not you, because you don't have a lot of money, you'll need to think about who is willing to accept that risk on your behalf and think about how to compensate them appropriately, because that's additional risk they are assuming on your behalf. If you haven't worked through this already, put the phone down and stop your lead generation until you're ready to go. Closing on a property is stressful enough. Don't add to that stress by not having at least a rough idea of who you're going to partner with and how that will look. Also, don't forget, finding investors is easy. Getting investors to actually write a check, that's the hard part. You really won't know if you have an investor until the check is written. Speaking of battles you need to win before you lead generate, your compensation structure with your investor. You do not want to have a disagreement in the heat of closing. Get this ironed out and in writing beforehand. Here are some ways you can compensate yourself. Finder's fee. A finder's fee is cash or equity up front as compensation for finding an investment opportunity. A couple examples. We have received a 5% finder's fee based on total purchase price. We have received finder's fees equal to the amount of capital we put into a deal. We have cashed out finder's fees. We have put finder's fees directly into deal equity. There are multiple different ways you can structure a finder's fee, but if you source the deal yourself, look to obtain one. Your time and effort sourcing that deal is worth something, so get paid. A promote structure. A promote structure is like an if-then statement in programming, where your equity is boosted a percentage if a certain return threshold is met. So, for example, say you have 33% equity in a deal, but you have a promote structure that at time of sale, if a 15% IRR is achieved, your 33% gets boosted to 50%. A waterfall structure. A waterfall structure is essentially just a more complicated promote structure. This would be more applicable to a fund or a bigger deal. It is worth your time to model one out just so you understand the nuts and bolts of the math. Asset management fees. Asset management fees can be structured multiple different ways, but we generally just take a percentage of the gross revenue that's agreeable to all parties involved. You need to be compensated for your time. Make sure you structure this properly. That will continue to incentivize you, and it is an appropriate amount for your investor to stomach as well. To summarize equity, there are an infinite number of ways to structure a deal. So make sure you know exactly what you want, i.e., your end game is tight, and have things laid out before you get under contract with the seller. Legal. I'll start off by reminding you this is my opinion and shouldn't be regarded as legal advice. Operating agreements. Operating agreements are like seatbelts. You don't put on the seatbelt because you plan on crashing your car. You put it on because of the other idiots on the road. So, with a minor inconvenience, you can prevent some major unintended consequences. An operating agreement is also like a seatbelt in the regard that you rarely need it, but you are super thankful it's there when that crash does occur. Again, my opinion, but yes, it is worth paying an attorney with experience to walk you through and build out a solid operating agreement. Umbrella LLCs. We operate an umbrella structure, meaning we have our Archimedes Group LLC, which has ownership in each property. Each property itself has its own LLC. So rather than going, Ryan Naris has ownership in AG X LLC, we say Ryan Naris owns 50% of Archimedes Group LLC, which owns X% of AG X LLC. This is one way to structure your business. This way may not be the best fit for you and what you are trying to accomplish. Again, insert endgame. I strongly recommend you speak with a CPA or attorney to determine what is best for you. Closing attorneys. Not all closing attorneys are created equal. Higher priced attorneys don't necessarily mean higher quality. Attorney incentives won't always align with yours, even if you are the client. I'll reiterate, connections are super valuable and can help you avoid selecting a dud. Then you'll have to find a title company. Same story here. Unfortunately, if you don't have the connections, like I didn't when I started, you just got to grind through the list of local people. We tried calling on our network for recommendations. That was pretty hit or miss. Eventually, though, you will find a good fit, but keep in mind, you're going to want to vet attorneys up front rather than discovering how difficult they are to work with in the heat of closing. To summarize legal, winging it is a terrible strategy. Get your ducks in a row up front. Miscellaneous closing items. Accounting systems. Google Sheets is great for really basic stuff, but once you start adding complexity, I'd strongly recommend you look into accounting software. Trust me, it's worth it. Due diligence lists. Grab as many free ones as you can online, and eventually you'll create your own. You're also constantly going to be adding to your own list. Gathering due diligence up front. The quicker you can hand off crucial items to your lender, the better. The lenders are going to want things like rent rolls, tax documents, lists of recent CapEx, your pro forma, the park's P&Ls, park pictures, list of employees, etc., etc. They may also request a bio of you, your team, and any case studies you have put together over the years of your previous experience. The more of this you have completed up front, the better. I like to have all my bio, personal financial statements, and case studies in my Google Drive because it's easy to find and distribute. Get ready for pulling teeth with these owners, as a lot of these mom and pops are unsophisticated operators and won't have crucial details you'll need, and you'll find yourself ending up having to piece everything together for them. Usually a broker is going to do all that for you, but if you have sourced something off market, you may end up having to essentially be your own broker. Proof of funds. So you don't need proof of funds to submit an LOI, but it helps, especially when you're dealing with brokers who are going to constantly be sizing up your ability to close. The supreme art of war is to subdue the enemy without fighting. Sun Tzu, The Art of War. It really comes down to this. The more prepared you are up front, the less battles you have to fight later on. Look, every black belt starts out as a white belt. There's no shame in being new. What's not okay is thinking you can just wing it and everything will be fine. Believe it or not, an error on your part will affect other people, and yes, you do run the risk of damaging the industry as a whole. So get out there, y'all, get to work, and please let me know if I can help. Would having my due diligence list help you? If so, I will let you have it for free. That's right, my list that took me 3 years to develop and includes plenty of fixes for mistakes that I made that now you can avoid. All absolutely free. All I ask for in exchange is leave me a 5-star review and a comment. Screenshot your comment after it goes live and email it to me at my website, archimedesgrp.com. Afterwards, let's connect. This episode was inspired by a listener just like you. Even if you don't have any ideas for future episodes, let's still connect, as I'm sure there are ways you and I can help each other out. I'm looking forward to chatting soon.